So I want you to imagine casually chatting with a venture capitalist about some side project you've been, just tinkering with in your spare time.
Okay, sounds like a pretty good networking scenario.
Right. But then imagine walking away the very next day with an exploding term sheet for $1 million.
Wow. Yeah, that sounds like a completely fabricated Silicon Valley myth.
It really does, but it's actually real. And the crazy thing is, the person who pulled this off, she didn't do it by following like the standard career playbook at all. You hear the conventional advice a million times. Find your one true passion, pick a lane, put your head down, and focus on absolutely nothing else.
Right, because it sounds safe, it's directional.
Exactly.
But that advice, it basically operates on the assumption that success is a linear track. Like you map out point A to point B, and as long as you just don't deviate, you'll eventually arrive at your destination.
Yeah.
But the truth is that rigid, singular focus is increasingly becoming a massive liability today. I mean, if you're only built to drive in one lane, a single cultural or technological roadblock can just end your entire journey right there.
Which is exactly why our mission in today's deep dive is to completely dismantle that one true goal myth. We are unpacking this fascinating interview with Angela Achara.
She is incredible.
She really is. She's a trailblazing entrepreneur, an early investor in massive unicorns like Bumble and ClassPass, and she's actually the talent manager who broke Priyanka Chopra in America.
Yep.
And her entire philosophy rests on being what she calls a 5-lane highway multipreneur. She advocates for driving multiple cars at different speeds all at the same time, dropping the map entirely and just trusting your own internal compass.
And, to really understand how someone even manages a 5-lane highway like that, you first have to look at what happens when society just refuses to hand you a map in the first place.
Right, because she didn't have one.
Not at all. Her childhood is really the foundational blueprint for her whole career. So she grew up in Buckinghamshire, England, in a completely white environment, and faced some really vicious physical bullying.
That's awful.
It was. And the isolation was heavily exacerbated by the media landscape back then. There was this British TV show called Grange Hill, and it featured a really heavily stereotyped South Asian character.
Oh, I can see where this is going.
Yeah, I mean, when you only have a few broadcast channels, whatever is on the screen basically becomes absolute truth to kids. Achara noted that after an episode of that show aired, the bullying at her school would just immediately intensify.
That is so tough. But the isolation was actually twofold for her, wasn't it? Because she wasn't just ostracized by her white peers, she faced severe rejection within her own community, too.
Exactly, because she's of mixed heritage.
Right, half Hindu and half Sikh, I think.
Yeah. So to the Sikh community, she wasn't Sikh enough, and to the Hindus, she wasn't Hindu enough. She was handed this profound double isolation where there was just simply no pre-existing box she could fit into.
It's like she was a puzzle piece from the completely wrong box. Most people in that scenario will spend their whole lives trying to, shave down their own edges just to fit into whatever picture is closest to them.
But she went the exact opposite route.
Yeah. She stopped trying to jam herself into the existing picture and built a completely new puzzle.
She really did. She used this kind of cultural alchemy. She realized that because she existed entirely in the margins between these different cultures, she actually had a unique vantage point to fuse them together.
Which led to her first big venture, right?
She and her husband created Desi Hits, which was a podcast and a company that mashed up Bollywood with R&B and Bhangra with hip-hop.
Which is so cool.
She took these totally disparate elements that weren't communicating with each other at all and fused them into an entirely new market.
And the ultimate validation of that alchemy was the track Beware of the Boys. I mean, it was this underground South Asian hit by Punjabi MC, but then Jay-Z collaborated on it, and it suddenly went completely mainstream.
Oh, that was a huge moment.
Right. She describes this really vivid memory of sitting at a stoplight in London, and the white drivers next to her rolled their windows down, blasting the exact same South Asian track she was listening to.
Wow.
It was a complete collision of worlds. She basically monetized the very misfit identity that used to isolate her.
Which, bringing it back, leads directly to that $1 million term sheet you mentioned at the start of the deep dive.
Oh, right. The venture capitalist story.
Yeah. So that transition from a passion project to a funded business didn't happen in some formal boardroom pitch. Achara was working a day job as an executive headhunter in Silicon Valley.
Okay.
And she happened to be talking to a VC. And she just authentically shared her enthusiasm for Desi Hits.
Right.
She casually mentioned it had, 250,000 downloads.
So she didn't even have a slide deck.
No pitch deck, no formal presentation. She just had undeniable cultural traction.
I mean, it sounds great to embrace your differences and get investors to bet on a mashup identity, but that highlights a massive hurdle to me. When she moved to Silicon Valley to work as that headhunter, she admits she knew literally no one.
Right. Not a single person in the state.
Not even her gardener. So when you're trying to build a mapless career, your network is basically your only navigation tool. How does someone just arrive in a new city and build a heavy-hitting network out of thin air?
Well, Achara utilized this fascinating mechanism that is actually highly effective for introverts, or really anyone battling social anxiety.
Oh, I love to hear this.
So she would go to a networking event, walk up to the very first person she saw, and simply ask what they did.
Just the first person.
Yeah, takes the pressure off. And if they said they worked in healthcare software, she would bank that information. Then she'd excuse herself and go meet the next person. If that second person happened to be, say, a healthcare tech investor, she would immediately walk them over and introduce them to the software developer.
Wait, hold on. If she walks up to a developer and then introduces them to an investor, she's not pitching herself at all.
Exactly.
They exchange numbers, and she's just left standing by the buffet. Doesn't she immediately make herself obsolete? Like, you're just the middleman who gets left out of the actual deals.
It totally seems like she's writing herself out of the equation, right?
Yeah.
But she's actually operating on the trust economy. She brought zero direct financial value to those initial conversations herself.
Okay.
However, when that developer eventually gets funded by that investor, both parties trace the genesis of their success straight back to her.
Oh, I see.
By consistently connecting people who can help each other, she became known as the ultimate connector. You inherit a piece of the gratitude and trust from both sides of the deal. So suddenly, highly influential people want you in the room because your mere presence makes their lives more lucrative.
Oh, wow. So you become indispensable by giving away value up front. That kind of reframes the entire concept of networking. And she applied that exact same value-first mechanism to finding mentors, too. She operates on this philosophy that mentors pick you. You don't pick them. I don't just walk up to a titan of an industry and beg for their time. You demonstrate your capability first.
Right, like her relationship with Indra Nooyi, the former CEO of PepsiCo.
Hmm.
Achara really wanted to connect with her, but rather than asking for a favor, she brought an asset to the table.
What does she do?
Well, Nooyi was releasing a book, so Achara actually leveraged her own network to get Mindy Kaling to write a blurb for it.
Oh, that's brilliant.
Yeah, she provided tangible value before ever asking for guidance. And in return, Nooyi became this fiercely protective mentor. Achara described her almost like a godmother who, cooked her doses, but who also demanded absolute, strict adherence to her business advice.
And then Achara paid that dynamic forward when she was on the other side of the table, right? With Payal Kadakia, the founder of ClassPass?
Yes, exactly. Achara picked Payal.
She let her work out of her own office at Starbucks so she wouldn't have to just sit in cafes all day. And they formed this mutual mentorship. Achara provided guidance on navigating venture capital, and Payal actually taught Achara the mechanics of how to pivot a business.
But, having a powerful network is really only half the equation.
What's the other half?
The other half is knowing where to deploy those resources. When you're managing a 5-lane highway, you have to be able to identify cultural shifts before they even happen.
Right.
This requires an acute mastery of reading the room. Achara leans heavily on this piece of advice she got from the music legend Jimmy Iovine. He told her, you have 2 ears and 1 mouth. Use your ears in relation to your mouth.
I love that. Listen twice as much as you speak. And that act of listening is the direct mechanism behind her investment in ClassPass, isn't it?
It is. She was listening to her friend, Rohan Oza, he's a big marketing executive, talk about this massive shift happening in fitness.
Right. People were abandoning those traditional big box gyms.
Yeah, they were flocking to boutique studios instead, like SoulCycle and Barry's Boot Camp.
Mm-hmm.
But the friction point was the analog booking process. I mean, people literally had to call individual studios on the phone to secure a bike.
Oh, man. I remember those days.
So when Payal Kadakia pitched Achara, a concept that was essentially open table for fitness classes, Achara just instantly recognized the pattern. The platform solved the exact cultural friction she'd been hearing about from her network.
It's interesting because the interview breaks her intuition down into a 3-tier framework. Level 1 is consuming the patterns.
Yeah.
So you go take a class at SoulCycle yourself.
Right.
Level 2 is seeing the patterns. You look around and realize, oh, everyone in my demographic is suddenly abandoning their gym memberships for these boutique classes.
Exactly.
But level 3 is creating the patterns, where you actually build the digital infrastructure to facilitate that cultural shift at scale.
And that level 3 pattern creation is exactly how she broke Priyanka Chopra in the United States, too, which is just an incredible pivot story.
Oh, yeah. Because initially, Acharya brought Chopra over to launch a music career, right?
Yes, they worked with major artists, but the music push just wasn't taking off the way they hoped. Jimmy Iovine actually told Acharya point blank that they were 20 years too early for a South Asian pop star in the U.S. market.
Ouch.
Yeah. I mean, a lesser manager would have just packed up and sent their client back to Bollywood right then. But Acharya listened to the broader culture. She looked at television and realized a massive shift was occurring.
Oh, the Shonda Rhimes era.
Exactly. Creators like Shonda Rhimes were ushering in this golden age of TV, featuring diverse, really complex female leads in shows like Scandal and How to Get Away with Murder.
But the friction there was actually with Priyanka herself, right? Because at the time, global film stars viewed American network television as a huge step down.
They really did. TV was not considered prestigious yet.
Right. So Acharya had to use immense persuasion to convince Chopra that the landscape had changed and that television was actually the new global stage. And it worked. She successfully persuaded her to pivot, which led to Chopra starring in Quantico on ABC, and that completely changed the trajectory of her career.
But spotting a level 3 pattern is entirely useless if you can't persuade anyone else to see it. Acharya's success with Chopra, with ClassPass, Desi hits all of it, hinged on her ability to sell an unproven vision.
So how does someone get better at that?
Well, to cultivate that skill, she highly recommends taking an improv class, actually.
Wait, improv? Really?
Yeah. Improv forces you to accept the reality given to you on stage without freezing. It systematically kills the anxiety of the unknown, and it basically teaches you how to swim when you're just thrown into deep water.
That makes a lot of sense. And she also relies heavily on the physical mechanics of managing fear, too. She talks about the physiological benefits of taking up space, like forcing your shoulders back, sitting openly, and signaling confidence to the room, even when internally you feel absolutely terrified.
Which is kind of the classic fake it till you make it advice.
Right, but I want to bring up an ethical question here. We hear a lot of backlash against fake it till you make it these days. People want authenticity. How do you reconcile faking your body language with the modern demand for authentic leadership?
That's a great point. But I think for her, it isn't about deceiving people regarding your product or your numbers. It's about physically managing your own stress hormones so your genuine ideas can actually be heard.
Oh, so you're hacking your own biology, not tricking the investor.
Exactly. And once you've managed your internal state, you can apply her golden rule of fundraising, which is, if you want to raise money, ask for advice. If you want advice, ask for money.
Oh, that's so good. Because if you walk into a room desperately pitching for cash, the investor's defensive shields go up instantly.
Instantly. But if you walk in and ask for their expertise, they lean in. They become intellectually invested in solving the problem with you. And that naturally makes them want to fund the solution.
It turns a monologue into a dialogue. She demonstrated this perfectly during a high-stakes job interview, too, where the executive told her, "Sell me a movie."
Oh yeah, that story is classic.
Most people would panic and just start summarizing the plot of, like, their favorite film. But instead, Acharya paused and asked the interviewer, well, what genres of movies do you like?
Right. She diagnosed the client before prescribing a solution.
Yes. You can't sell a vision until you figure out what actually lights the other person up. Selling is not a one-way street.
It really isn't. But, it is crucial to recognize that even master persuaders, even level 3 pattern creators, they eventually crash.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, driving 5 cars at once means you're exposing yourself to a massive amount of surface area for failure, and Acharya hit absolute rock bottom.
She experienced a simultaneous multi-front collapse, didn't she?
She did. Her highly publicized business, Desi Hits, failed. At the same time, her 19-year relationship and marriage ended.
Yeah.
She was battling infertility. And on top of all of that, her sister was fighting MS and later, cancer.
The psychological dissonance of that period must have been absolutely brutal. She was literally on magazine covers being celebrated as this trailblazing woman in tech and music, and yet she was spending her nights crying on her closet floor, totally engulfed by imposter syndrome.
It was incredibly dark. But the turning point came from 2 really vital pieces of perspective.
What was the first one?
The first was from Jimmy Iovine again. When she confessed how mortified she was that her business had failed, he just told her, "You're an album, not a single."
Oh, I love that.
Right. He didn't care that her first single flopped. He was interested in the entire body of work she would produce over her lifetime.
Because it all comes down to betting on the founder. Smart money in Silicon Valley bets on the resilience of the person, not just the initial idea.
Exactly. And the second perspective shift came from her pastor, Touré. He told her, sometimes you feel like you're buried, but actually you've been planted.
Wow. Buried versus planted?
Yeah. The difference between the two is entirely about intent and potential. A buried object is dead. It's static. But a planted seed is dormant. It's actively using the darkness and the crushing pressure of the soil to build the kinetic energy it needs to eventually break the surface.
It requires surviving the destruction to trigger the next phase of growth.
Exactly.
You know, it makes me think of the lodgepole pine tree in nature. Its pine cones are sealed tight with this incredibly hard resin. They can sit on the forest floor for years doing absolutely nothing. They literally require the extreme destructive heat of a raging forest fire to melt that resin so the cone can finally crack open and germinate.
Oh, that's a perfect analogy.
The fire looks like pure destruction, but it's actually the biological prerequisite for the next generation of life. And Achara lived that fire. She dropped her ego entirely, moved into a friend's basement, went all the way back to Silicon Valley to ask for jobs again, and ultimately became a partner at Trinity Ventures.
And she navigated that recovery using a mindset that's kind of analogous to how Roger Federer plays tennis.
Okay, how so?
Well, Federer operates on this balance of high standards and high grace. So you play every single point as if it's the absolute most important point in the world. But the millisecond that point is over, especially if you double fault and lose it, it instantly becomes the least important point in the world.
So you grant yourself the grace to drop the emotional weight of it.
Right, so you can be fully present for the next serve. You separate your identity from the outcome.
How does someone actually apply high grace when society demands high standards constantly?
You rigorously analyze why the business failed, so you maintain your high standards, but you grant yourself the high grace of not labeling yourself a failure as a human being.
That is so profound.
Yeah.
But let's talk about surviving fires on a macro scale for a second.
Okay.
If Achara had to use that planted resilience to pivot because a single business cycle failed, what happens when an entire global industry flips overnight? Because our sources highlight a massive disruption barreling toward every multi-earner right now, and that is artificial intelligence.
Oh, yeah. Achara states flatly that the future of influence is AI.
And the speed of this disruption is staggering. Companies already have tens of thousands of completely digital AI influencers moving massive amounts of product across social media.
It's wild to think about. These digital entities, they don't sleep, they don't get into scandals, and they use infinite data sets to perfectly hack the algorithm. They adapt instantly to give a specific user exactly what they want to see.
Which is a profound threat to traditional human talent. Brands are already showing a distinct preference for micro-influencers and AI over traditional A-list actors, just because the AI can move niche products with terrifying, hyper-targeted efficiency.
But Achara points out a strategic solution here. Human talent needs to own their data. Smart actors and creators will build their own AI avatars, like an alter ego or a digital twin, to scale themselves.
Wait, how does a creator actually execute that?
By feeding a large language model a decade of your specific styling choices, your communication patterns, your aesthetic preferences, your buying habits, you build an alter ego that thinks and curates exactly like you do. Yeah, this allows a multi-reneur to scale their specific taste to millions of users simultaneously. So you could build a massive, highly profitable global fashion brand run by your AI, 247, while you sleep.
Okay, but this brings up some, existential dread for me.
Uh-oh. Let's hear it.
Well, if AI has access to infinite data and it can perfectly read the room to give people exactly what they want based on that data, how does a human connector like Achara even compete with an algorithm? I mean, an AI can introduce the healthcare software developer to the tech investor in a millisecond. What happens to human intuition?
Yeah, I mean, it's a completely valid fear. But we have to remember the fundamental limits of data. AI is entirely predictive. It analyzes historical data to guess what will happen next.
Right. Yeah.
So it operates strictly on level 1 and level 2 of our earlier framework consuming patterns and scene patterns. But human intuition operates on level 3.
Creating pattern.
Exactly. AI would never have mashed up Bhangra and hip-hop because there was zero historical data to suggest those markets would interact successfully. AI would never have pushed a Bollywood pop star into an American network TV thriller when everyone was saying it was 20 years too early.
That makes total sense. AI interpolates the data it has, but human beings extrapolate these leaps of faith. We take the unproven risks. AI can optimize the traffic on the 5-lane highway, but humans still have to imagine where the highway is actually being built.
Precisely. The human element is the willingness to attempt an unproven fusion of ideas.
So as we pull all of these threads together, the core message from Acharya's journey is incredibly clear. The old, safe advice of staying on a single track and ignoring everything else is dead. It's a liability in a rapidly shifting world.
You have to be willing to be an album, not just a single.
Yes. You have to embrace driving on that 5-lane highway, fully understanding that your different interests, your different businesses, and your different passions are all going to move at completely different speeds.
And the beauty of the Mapleist journey is that every detour, every apparent failure, and every random connection builds a unique resilience that a straight-line path simply cannot provide.
Which brings us right back to where we started. If you are sitting there right now, gripping a rigid map, terrified of taking a wrong turn, maybe it is time to realize that the map was drawn by someone else anyway.
So true.
Think about it. If your current career, your current title, or your passion is just one single track on the album of your life, what completely different genre of track have you been too afraid to record? And what if failing at that exact new thing is exactly what provides the intense heat required to crack you open and plant you for your next big phase? Drop the map. See what happens.